Okay. Now this finishes up with the one lesson. The second lesson which we are going to talk about right now would be all related to the designing Azure Virtual Desktop architecture. See, as of right now, so far itself, we have discussed about a bit of pricing, bit of planning, a bit of sizing, workload structure, elements, components, which are a key part of the virtual desktop, Azure Virtual Desktop, I mean to say. All right. So what is this section going to talk about? Now, this design Azure Virtual Desktop architecture is something the one which helps you to again take some key factor decisions. Among them, one of them is related or associated with the network, which you do understand that what exactly the network is, what should be the network capacity, speed requirements. Why? Why? Because when we connect to the session, a good amount of bandwidth, how many number of users, how many number of sessions, how many number of applications, services are being connected, executed, consumed. So, and also from the location perspective itself also, right? Reason, our reason is very simple, guys. Here itself, uh, if in case if you got a low network bandwidth, we do understand that where exactly it makes up an impact. So better the bandwidth, it really impacts the quality of the experience as well. So high latency, low performance. Low latency, better performance. And all these things are basically dependent on the different types of applications, resolutions, configuration. So what is more important for us? Being as an admin, what is important for us? Being as an admin, it becomes our responsibility that the network planning, connectivity, bandwidth, everything should be worked out. All right. So the point is basically optimization. And depending on the location through which your Azure Virtual Desktop service is being connected, reached. So how would you be able to come to know about the round trip time? So this section actually helps you out to get some understanding about those areas. Not only from that aspect, as you can see that recommend an operating system for the Azure Virtual Desktop implementation. Now, which operating systems are available? Whether you talk about the client servers, which ones are the best practices? We are going to talk about that one. And as you're going to set up the virtual desktop pool, the host pool, I mean to say, in that case, which load balancing method are available and which one would be used when means the business use case. All right. And as we are planning up the stuff onto the cloud itself, that means you're also involving with the subscriptions and management groups as well. All right. Okay. So the first thing first, which comes up is assess your network capacity and the speed requirement for Azure Virtual Desktop. All right. So here itself, if we say that, see, what are the elements, what are the areas which helps you to determine that okay, how much approximate of bandwidth would be used or would be required. So there are certain factors, and these factors are basically somehow related to the workload types. All right. When it comes down to the workload type itself, it's these are all being segregated based onto the type of the connection, the type of the resolution you're using up. Every factor comes up, right? So keeping that in mind, there are certain areas which you should be familiar of. So here it comes in. So workload type can be light, workload type can be medium, workload type can be heavy, workload type can be power. So all these things are basically being designed and decided based on, maybe let's say for example, if I'm working in a test environment and there are very few users which are being connected and not frequently they are getting connected. Maybe that can be considered as light. Some medium-sized applications, enterprise-based applications, more number of users connecting, frequency is high, so the workload is high. In that case, the recommended bandwidth at least, which says that when you go with a heavy, and if I'm using some heavy enterprise-based applications which are being executed during the session itself, obviously it is going to consume more amount of a bandwidth. It's not from that aspect only, it's basically the type of the resolution which we are using up, isn't it? Why? Because that quality does matter. When a user is being connected to a session, you don't want that session to be distorted. You don't want the display to be a bit distorted, isn't it? The display should be crisp and clear with a high resolution. Now, if I'm expecting a good resolution as a performance or as an end user for the session to which you're getting connected to, so ID admins have to be planning up the good amount of bandwidth, all right? And that is you can see that if they need a very 4K technology display resolution, which can expect or you can expect approximately 15 Mbps per sessions as well. So idea is that how you can gather. So in this case, we can only come to know depending on what type of users, the behavior, the purpose, the location, and the frequency, the type of the applications they're going to use. So all of these factors have to be considered before you can take certain kind of a decision. All right. Now, Azure Virtual Desktop also gives you a tool which is called a Azure Virtual Desktop Experience Estimator. This is something basically depending on from the location, from your location, from where you're going to connect to Azure, where these VMs, the session host VMs, have to be deployed. So reason from there you're going to connect. In that case, the RTT matters, the round trip time. So this particular tool is the one with the help of which at least you can determine that what is going to be the round trip time in milliseconds from the location to each and every Azure region. So what needs to be considered here itself? When you're planning to deploy something on Azure, are we going to deploy simple like that? No, you're not going to simply deploy that one. No. Why? Why? Because the decision of the region is also very important. How? Why? Because the decision of region itself would be considered on various factors: latency, cost, performance, availability, services, support. So what are these? These are nothing but the different decision factors based on which you pick and choose. Okay, hey, this is going to be my primary region. This is going to be my secondary region, the DR region, where the workloads, no doubt, we are talking about the virtual desktop. What are they using at the backend? The session host. and the session host itself is a VM. All right. So here it's not only a part of the VM, it can be any kind of a resource. So the decision of the region is important because the planning and the decision making is very, very critical. So once you decide it, at least this also adds on into the initial planning that, okay, hey, if these are the regions where itself we are having the less round trip time, in that case, we can pick and choose those regions as well. Conditionally, that falls under our own requirement. It meets our own requirement. That is the biggest factor which should be considered. All right. So estimator is something, the one tool which is very, very relevant, and it helps you to get that piece of information in which it becomes very easy during the initial decision making, isn't it? Okay. Now, so far basically we have been looking to the architecture, we have been looking about the components, we have been looking about the references. So a good amount of planning. You can imagine that how much amount of the planning is supposed to be done, isn't it? In that area. Now, once you've decided into which particular region that service has to be deployed, obviously the workload, which workload? Azure Virtual Desktop. What it is going to use? Session host, the host servers, and the VDAs to which you are going to establish the session. What are they going to have? Which operating system? Which version? Purpose. So there are some recommended operating systems which are being recommended, especially for the environment. So keeping that in mind itself, if you see here, the client doesn't support Windows 8 or 8.1. So Azure Virtual Desktop resources can be accessed from which versions? 10, whether 64, 32, anything it can be. Choose your client on your own. Why? Why? Because when you're going to install the client setup, the remote desktop setup itself, these are some of the client operating systems which are being set it up and which are being supported, which are being recommended, whether you go with the Windows 10, whether you go with the Windows 7, anything it can be. So you have the flexibility to pick and choose your 64-bit, your 32-bit, your ARM 64 versions, anything it can be, anything. All right. So see, all these areas are coming in. And as I said that when you're setting up a host pool, so guys, host pool is basically nothing but a collection of the servers. Technically speaking up, they are being referred as session host servers. All right. So when we are setting up a host pool, now that particular pool would be having multiple host servers, multiple session host servers, I mean to say. So if you have multiple session host servers, obviously my other area would be focused on availability, performance, costing. All these factors are coming in. So let me just tell you one more thing about availability. When we talk about availability, or you can say high availability, this high availability has got two sections. One, the infrastructure availability. Second, the application availability. It's not that just the application has to be highly available. What about the infrastructure? Maybe if my infrastructure is highly available, what about the application availability? So both of them, both the requirements, both the availability have to be well planned. So when we are talking about when we're talking about high availability in context of infrastructure, Azure provides you various services. So just for your information, for the infrastructure availability, Microsoft gives you the flexibility to use availability set. I repeat it again. It is called availability set, or you can use availability zones. Now, why I'm going to opt for them? Why? Because they give you this SLA. They ensure the uptime, no matter depending on how your infrastructure is being designed. So from the service perspective, host perspective, racks perspective, blade service perspective, and having a higher SLA, that is more important. So we have got two features, one services rather, I would say that one is called availability set, second is called availability zone. So here itself the SLA matters. If I compare both of them, the Azure availability zone, which comprises of three zones, each and every zone having its own set, a collection of data centers. And each and every zone is being well connected with a fiber optic with at least 300 miles distance. So each and every zone would be having a collection of multiple data centers, and they're all being well connected with a fiber optic. So in that case, will it be possible for us to split the workload in different zones? Yes. Why would we do that? Why? Because we need no single point of failure. I repeat it again. You're getting no single point of failure. So this way, at least I can achieve the infrastructure availability. What about the application availability? Which application I'm talking about? It can be your Active Directory. It can be your database server. It can be your application server. It can be your web servers. Anything it can be. So it again depends on to the type of the application, type of the workload, which availability services are available, how you can load balance them. One example, let's say for example, you have got domain controller. How would you ensure availability of the Active Directory services? So you can have multiple domain controllers, you achieve it. On the other side, okay, I'll take one more example. You've got a collection of database servers. How would you ensure the availability of them? Clustering, log shipping, availability, groups. What did I achieve? I'm trying to achieve the application availability. Similarly, you've got web servers, application servers. How would you make them available? By using load balancers. So the idea is basically when it comes down to any kind of a workload, the setup of the workload, the planning of the workload, the availability of those workloads from the infrastructure side and as well as from the application side, it has to be. Similarly, the Azure Virtual Desktop is also as good as an application. How? Why? Because within the Azure Virtual Desktop, the customer is responsible of setting up the host pools. And the host pool is having nothing but a collection of the session host servers. If I'm having more than one session host server, which load balancing. So here itself, we are talking about the application availability. No doubt, the infrastructure availability has to be in place. Infrastructure availability has to be in place. So there is additional planning. Don't forget, guys, that one. So host pool, if we are planning here itself right now, from the application load balancing, the services load balancing between the session host servers. So Azure Virtual Desktop provides you the different load balancing methods. And one of the method which is being provided by the Azure Virtual Desktop. See, these load balancing methods are within the host pool for the session host servers. So one of the load balancing method which is being referred as breadth first. So in these cases, you can determine to which servers the session should be connected first. And once it reaches down to a specific limit, the session can be hosted with other servers as well. That means you're not putting the load on every server. Here itself, you're going server by server. It's a breadth first. So this is technically speaking up, which is called breadth mode as well. Same way, if I go with the depth. So how many instances? Ideal for the cost conscious organization, the one which wants to have a more granular number of virtual machines they have allocated to the host pool at any given point of time. So if you try to compare with this one, so yeah. So you can distribute with the users, you can distribute with the environments, and here itself you can distribute based on the hosts, the depth mode in which consume, reach, move to the next one. So at least with this way, with this particular method also, you are implementing and achieving what the application availability you're achieving with the load balancing. At least from that aspect, this is going to be very, very helpful. So in those cases, let's go back once again. And if I talk about the breadth first, see, this is basically which is going to help you out to eventually distribute the user sessions across the session hosts, right? And the depth first, basically, which is going to help you out in which you can saturate one session host and then it can go down to the next session host as well also, right? So these load balancing methods are available. So depending on whether you're going with the breadth first or whether you're going with the depth first. So in the depth, what is the benefit of the using the depth first? Basically, is something the method which helps you out to saturate one host at a time, and then it can move down to the another host if required or whenever required. So with this, at least you can control about the number of hosts. What I'm achieving with this, depending on again the requirement. But remember one thing, when you're setting up the host pool for any given for any given host pool, you can only configure one of these load balancing methods. For a given host pool, you can't use both the load balancing methods, any one of them, which is being decided while you're setting up. While you're setting up and while you're configuring the host pools. So at that particular point of time, you can make such decisions. But the thing is basically, I can or you can only use only one method at any given point of time. So see guys, basically the overall it comes up to understand that how the structures, how the configurations can be done and being set it up, all right. And it becomes very, very convenient and handy for us to take such decisions. as we are hosting everything onto the cloud. As I said earlier itself, we are going to use subscriptions, we are going to use management groups. So let me tell you something about Azure subscription here itself. All right. So Azure has two different architectures. One, physical, second, logical. You must have definitely heard about them. One of them is being referred as the physical architecture. Second one is referred as the logical architecture. What is physical architecture? The physical architecture is basically in which you pick up the geography. Like say for example, you pick up United States, you pick up United Kingdom, you pick up Australia, you pick up India. So what are these geographies? Each and every geography has its own set of different regions. Like like what? Like you got a West US, you got East US to South Central US. What are these? These are the regions. The regions where exactly you have your physical data centers. So geographies, the regions, they're comprising of what? They're comprising of the physical architecture. What about the logical one? Logical in the sense, the way you can organize your resources. It's not the point that we are going to deploy the resources and my job is done. No, my job is to make sure that whatever the resources am I going to deploy should be well organized. What I'm referring to, why I'm talking about this organized. So here itself, Azure gives you a support of a logical architecture as well. That logical architecture helps you to organize your resources based on what? Based on what? Based on your branch locations, based on your environments like dev, test, UAT, prod, pre-prod. Sometimes you want to organize based on your different departments. Maybe let's say, for example, a security team wants to set up their own environment in which they have to work on. DevOps team, development team, they want to have their own environment. So what are you trying to achieve? With this, wouldn't be much easier for us if in case if you organize the resources in such a manner. So branch wise, region wise, location wise, department wise, environment wise. So if in case if we structure it out, it becomes much easier for us to manage them. Manage in terms of what? Manage in terms of delegation, manage in terms of administration, management in terms of policies, everything. Which policies I'm talking about? Azure policies. Which management I'm talking about? Delegation, admin. So from that aspect, it becomes easy. And obviously, you have got a good visibility, you have got a responsibility, accountabilities are there itself, rather than having all the workloads. One more thing which comes up that you can organize based on the workload types as well. When I say workload types means all web servers, all database servers, all application servers, all identity servers, like that. So overall, the point is basically to explain you, to have you make you familiar that Azure helps you to logically organize The resources for that one, it has its own components. Which components? Likewise, if you see on your screen, you have the management group, the subscription, the resource group, and the resources. This is the one which you can see over your screen is nothing but the logical architecture of Azure. So you can set them up. Maybe let's have example. If I'm talking about the management group is not a subscription. Management group is basically a collection of multiple subscription. The subscription itself is a boundary, administrative boundary of what? Of the resources. And inside the subscription itself, we are organizing the resources based on the resource group. Resource group, like you can have different resource groups. One for the test environment, HR department, marketing department, development team, DevOps team. It is technically possible that you can keep all your resources in one resource group. Challenge. Challenge is what? Management, administration, security, privacy, policies, delegation. Although you can achieve them, but with a huge amount of administrative overhead. Why not to structure them in such a manner that it becomes easier for us to manage them? So what you can do, you can, let's say for example, if you're having a management group. So this you can consider as a top level. Let's say for example, you can take one example as a region. So a region, then subscription. You can take this one as an environment. So you can go with any such combination. Let's say region first, then the environment, or how you can go with a combination of these ones as well, right? So in that case, it can be done easily. So maybe let's say, for example, you want to have a management groups with the you can say with the environment. So you know that okay, in this particular environment, you have got so many subscriptions. There is no specific one thumb rule that you have to follow this. No, you can use a combination of regions, departments, environments, identical workloads. A collection of these ones, you can structure out your hierarchy. You can structure out your logical architecture. So having this in place, at least it becomes easy. And as you can see that over the top, you've got a tenant. Who is the tenant? Azure AD is the tenant. Every customer has its own tenant. Every single customer has its own tenant as well. So keeping that in mind, again, those accounts have to be given some sort of a delegation, permission, access, everything. All right. So the idea is basically to have some significance that how easy it can be made to organize and to manage the resources. And that is how the logical architecture comes into place. All right. Yeah. And same way is basically you're configuring nothing but a location for the virtual desktop metadata. So probably itself when it comes down to the customer, Azure Virtual Desktop stores the global metadata information as well. Where? In the data center. So these things are all being stored within the data center itself also, the metadata, and the metadata is nothing but the one which is having your tenant names, your host pool names, your app group names, your UPNs, user principal names, everything it can be. So the customer will choose a region. So in that case, this again reminds us to making sure that the region which you have picked up the region which you decide is the one where the metadata is going to be stored in the related geography. All right. So this is again a key factor which should be considered as well. All right.